At the point when we bought our house, for a very long time it had been home to various squatting wildlife, but before we came, no humans had lived here for several decades. Since neither raccoons nor squirrels are very big on maintenance, the roof developed a rather large hole, which no one ever fixed. This meant that the house was open for years upon years to the mercy of Iowa weather, which, for those of you who've never been here, can be pretty brutal. All that rain and melted snow led to a great deal of damage all throughout the house, and in every room we had to repair entire networks of cracks throughout the walls and ceilings. It was quite the job. In my last video, I described and showed the process of drilling holes around each crack, pumping in 2 different types of special plaster repair glue, and then screwing in anchors to hold the plaster in place while the glue set. The number of anchors you're seeing in this room should give you some idea of just how many times this whole process had to be repeated in each and every room of the house just to keep the walls and ceilings from falling apart. We had to do this in every single room you're going to see in this series, although I won't subject you to watching the full plaster repair process in the whole house. Just please be aware that all the work you're seeing represented here right now had to be done in all the rooms you're going to see in this series before we could even think of painting them. In the course of this little mini-series, you'll see more painting than plaster stabilization, but that's just because painting's more photogenic. What you're seeing here now is the work that went before and lies under the paint in each room, and the stabilization was just the start. After the glue had set, we had to take out all the plastic anchors and spackle in the holes they'd left, fill in the cracks, pick off any excess glue that had oozed out, and replaster the holes where the original plaster had fallen out completely. Only after all that could we get around to painting.
So these are just different versions of the same thing. These are from the 1890s, and at that point they were using mica to do the eye protection. But these are very old and fragile at this point, so I've been using these in fixing the house.
Now Sarah will demonstrate safety techniques on ladders. Note 1 foot. Note the wobbly ladder that came with the house. You can see the quality. And she reaches all the way into the corner and stretches out. And yes.
Only the best safety, only the most careful safety techniques when working on this house.
So this is where the plaster had started to come away from the lath, and I went over and drilled the holes to inject the glue it back to the lath, but it still wasn't quite flush, so we're just evening up the edges a little bit. So this is plaster mixed from plaster dust and tiny little smidgens of water. And then stirred and stirred and stirred.
Stay. That's better. Okay, yes, some of you wants to live on me, that's fine. But most of you, I want up there. Listen to me. I command ye, O plaster. That's better.
I have to mix this a little too thick, just a trifle.
Okay, luckily we can fix that with more water.
Yes, we can, but let's see if I can make it work. I'm just telling you for future reference for when you're working on these things.
Sure.
After you've finished with the eternal plumbing.
Yes.
Then you can help me with the eternal plaster.
That is correct.
And together
We can rule the house as husband and wife.
Yes. Yes. Join the dark side. We have cookies.
Yes.
So here I am. How many months into this? I started in May. It's now late October. A long time. And I have gotten one reasonably sized room and one very small room to the point where they're almost ready to start painting. At this rate, I should finish the house about 3 months after I die of old age. My ghost can live here. Maybe.
So we are working on this closet that's going to be in Sarah's workroom, and it obviously had some water coming down it and some issues over the years. We're starting with this in terms of painting this room because, well, you know,
we can't make it any worse.
We can't make it any worse, and if we learn anything doing it, this is a good place to learn. In the course of removing some shelves, which need to have new supports built for them, by the way, Sarah decided to wipe them down, at least briefly, and there's one she wiped down without putting any effort into it, and here's the one we haven't wiped down yet, just to give you an idea of how dirty and grungy everything is.
Here is a bucket of what was clear water after having wiped down one shelf quickly. And there's the shelf again that still needs to be wiped down. Incidentally, that shelf that hasn't been wiped down yet, when we moved in, the whole house was in that state. It's been a long haul just getting it, well, would you call it livable? I've been living here, but would you call it livable?
It's not what most people would call livable.
Not really.
Not really.
No.
So upon further reflection, looking at these shelves, the one that I had scrubbed down, or started to scrub down, we realized after several decades of water leaking through the roof and going onto this shelf, it's pretty rotten. And the other one, when I picked it up to start cleaning it, it fell apart. So we think that this calls for some nice new shelves to go in the closet. And so we can take the measurements off of these old shelves and build some new shelves rather than, because this is no longer a tenable shelf. This is a former shelf. So we have a very narrow space in this tiny little closet that is losing its ceiling. And I'm having to stabilize the ceiling in this very tiny little space. And this requires a great deal of ridiculous contortion on my part to get the screws in place, because the footprint of the ladder will not allow for getting the whole ladder in here. This is probably not a recommended way to do this. Meanwhile, I have plaster falling on my head.
And here we have Sarah wiping down the inside of the closet, at least so the paint will stick. We're not trying to get all those stains off because there's no point. They will not come off. We're going to paint over them. But this does require us at least making it clean enough that the paint will stick.
Yes.
It is a process.
Yes.
Well, it's all a process and a series of steps.
Yes.
When we came here, not only was this closet filthy, as you see, there was water streaming down from the roof, and on top of that, it was chock-a-block full of junk that was getting soaked from the water streaming down from the roof. So first, I had to clean out all the junk, then we had to get somebody to fix the roof. Now I'm finally to the stage where I get to scrub the closet, then we get to paint it.
These shoes that I've been wearing for the house repair projects are pretty ridiculous by this point. I'm wearing black socks. You can see them through the shoes in the place where the shoes have split. The benefit is that I don't care if they get paint and plaster and all sorts of things on them, but they are pretty ridiculous by this point.
Here you can see some of the really grimy areas of the paint, which definitely require covering up. I know it's 100 and something years worth, but it still seems like people in this house were doing some filthy things. Filthy, filthy things. Check out this corner. Look at how dark that is. No?
But yeah, that's the trouble with smokers. The tar gets all over everything. And in the 19th century, it actually, the women would segregate the men into special rooms where the men were allowed to smoke because they didn't want that stuff getting everywhere.
And where the decor was typically dark.
Right.
So it wouldn't show as much.
Okay, you filthy beasts, menfolk, get into these little squalid corners and do your icky business there. We don't want it messing up our house.
Exactly.
It wasn't until the 20th century that smoking became a thing for women, and it was because the cigarette companies saw an untapped market, and they put a huge amount of marketing effort into trying to convincing women to smoke. They were unfortunately very successful at it because they snared in some New York socialite debutantes into the matter and put them in the Easter parade smoking and managed to make it a fashionable thing. But that's the 20th century for you. In the 19th century, they realized it's a filthy habit.
Yes, and they were civilized.
Yes, they were very civilized. But this house has lived through a lot of 20th century.
This is the room that had the most paint damage because of roof leaking. So it is, of course, going to be one of the first rooms we repaint, trying to reproduce the stencils as best we can and get the color as close to the original as possible. You can see the lighter blue, which it originally was before a whole bunch of grime, and we are going to try to replicate that nice cheery blue color. This is going to be Sarah's den annex and workroom, and it should be gorgeous when we're done.
When the roof was leaking, there were waterfalls cascading out of the ceiling. It was not a pretty picture, and I nearly had a nervous breakdown. And besides that, the paint has just ever since we moved in, and obviously for some time before that, the paint has just been coming down like snowflakes throughout the whole room, which Gabriel can probably get you some close-ups on.
Yes, you can definitely see it there in these areas where the paint is simply flaking into pieces, largely due to water damage.
Over many decades, ever since the original owner of this house passed away in the late 20th century, at the age of 99.
Was it 99?
She was 99.
Wow. Well, she hung on as long as she could.
She did, but we all got to go sometime. And the house suffered in her absence.
Most definitely.
But between the waterfalls coming through the roof, the paint coming down like snow, simply leaving things as they were when we moved in was not an option.
Correct.
And so we have been repairing and repairing and repairing. There were at some point squatters in the basement, we think, because we found half-empty beer bottles, not full beer bottles, mind you, not empty beer bottles, no, half-empty beer bottles on the floor. And somebody's porno DVD. And none of that did any good for this place, I can tell you.
And certainly it didn't do any of the maintenance or repairs that were necessary.
No. No, it did not. There's just a little broken corner here. I gotta try to get in.
Good job.
Thank you.